This is the Ask Lee slot, and I'm Lee, so you're asking me. There we go. I'm a poet, and I didn't even know it. Right. Okay, so as always, the Ask Lee slot is where you can ask a question, and I'll answer it on a video on one of these slots. And so if you could ask your questions, that would be most appreciated in the comments to one of the Ask Lee videos, or if you're listening on the podcast or watching on Instagram, in the comments on that platform. And yeah, please ask, because otherwise we may run out of questions, and then I'm just going to have to change this whole slot to something different. Alright, so today's question is probably going to be a bit of a quick one, actually. It comes from Blades. What is consecration? When would it be appropriate? When would it not be appropriate? Alright, so consecration is very basically performing ritual acts on an object or tool which would separate it from the profane world, or this mundane world, I like to call it the profane world, and making it sacred. Alright, so this you find a lot in any form of magic which is ceremonially based. So you will find it in Wicca, most of the neo-pagan paths actually, because a lot of them originate from neo-Wicca nowadays anyway, which have a ceremonial magic basis. And you know, the whole premise with this, and looking into ceremonial magic itself, is that we need to separate the spiritual from the material. So what we're doing is we are taking particular items, particular objects, whether they be tools of your own craft, so you would have your dagger or your athame, you would have your sword, your wand, any staffs, any kind of ritual tools, cauldron, let's see what else, a chalice. You can even separate a bowl for libations, a bowl to hold salt in, anything which you will be using within your magical practice. And you know, this separates, as I said, in ceremonial magic it's all about separating the material from the spiritual, and therefore you are separating your magical life from your mundane or profane life. Now, where is this appropriate and where is it not appropriate? If you are following a magical path which is ceremonially based, then it becomes appropriate, and I would even say necessary. If, however, you are following a more traditional witchcraft path, you'll find that a lot of times this is not done. For a lot of people who are following that path, they do consecrate, purify, bless particular items to work with in their craft, specifically in their craft. But you know, if you consider the old witch in the forest, or even just plain old folk magic, a lot of the time the items that were used were just taken out of the kitchen. You needed a knife to cut a bunch of weeds, or you know, you needed a mortar and pestle to grind your herbs. You usually found it in the kitchen. You needed a cauldron, it was the cooking pot. You know, way back when, couldn't really afford multiple cooking pots, so the pot that was used to cook the food in was also the pot that was used as a cauldron in particular rituals, and also to brew up the witches' brews, the herbal teas, things like that. You know, so they probably didn't have all these separate items that they could use, and they could take one and make it sacred and pull it out of the profane world and make it specifically sacred for ritual use. It was just, you needed a tool, go into the kitchen, go wherever, you know, you needed to sweep out negativity from your house, take the broom. You need to step between the worlds, take the broom. You know, the besom was the besom, it was the broom that you kind of did everything with. So, you know, we have had this development throughout the centuries into ceremonial magic, where again I'm saying we have to separate the material from the spiritual, and that then becomes a question of what do you practice? Do you follow a practice which does require you to separate the material from the profane from the spiritual, or do you practice a path which encompasses all of it? You know, the profane is part of the spiritual. Your magical life is part of your normal everyday life. And personally, I think that should be the case. We shouldn't be separating the two. They do form. I mean, it's just part of our whole. We have a body and we have a spirit. You know, it's here until we die. That's the only time they're going to separate. Well, technically speaking, there are other times. I'll get into that now. So, you know, again, what are you practicing? What is your own personal belief? What is your own personal practice? And that will answer the question of, is it appropriate or is it not appropriate, or when is it appropriate or not appropriate to consecrate an item. Even if you are practicing something which does envelop all of these aspects, so it doesn't separate the material from the spiritual, and you know, brings everything into unison and balance, then there may still be items that you want to separate. As I said, coming back to the cauldron, we can nowadays have more than one pot. So we can have a pot in our kitchen to cook something in, we can have a pot to brew herbal teas in, and we can have a pot or a cauldron that we can use within our ritual practice. So, you know, we can have all those items, therefore we can consecrate an item to use within our magical workings. But you know, it just really is personal. So that is consecration. As I said, this is probably going to be a quick one. It's a very quick one. Just trying to think if there's anything else I can add to that. No, not really. It's quite simple and straightforward and basic, I think. So just to repeat, consecration is taking an object and making it sacred, removing it from the profane world. But in some cases you may consider that not to be a necessity, because you are of the understanding that the material and the magical are all part of the one big mishmash world. So, or you may think that, or consider that separating the material and the spiritual is a necessity in your own personal path. So it all comes back to that. Okay, so that's it for this week. And if you are around on Friday, this Friday at 5 PM GMT, join us on the Black Hat Chat. We are discussing fate versus free will again, and I think this is going to be a very, very interesting one. So get the popcorn and come and enjoy, and join us in the live chat. Okay, so I'll see you then, or I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Cheers for now. Bye bye.